Muchas gracias, Miguel. Hola a todos. Gracias de nuevo por asistir al Foro Internacional de Expansión. Vamos con una sesión que creo que va a ser del máximo interés para todos. We got Larry Fink, Chairman and CEO of BlackRock, the biggest asset manager in the world. He was not able to be here today in Alcalá, but he's virtually with us from BlackRock offices in New York. Welcome, Mr. Fink, and thank you very much for having some time.
Well, it's great to be here, at least on video. I apologize I can't be in person.
Yeah. As I said, BlackRock is the biggest asset manager in the world. They have more than $10 trillion under management. For those who get lost with so many zeros, this is equivalent to 7 times Spanish GDP. This has been achieved in just 36 years. Mr. Fink was one of the co-founders of BlackRock in 1988. Then he was part of Blackstone, the private equity firm, and then he became independent in 1999. In Spain, I think you have been present for 30 years now.
We have our 30-year anniversary in the Iberian area, so it's great.
Yeah, and in addition to organic growth, BlackRock made some very strategic acquisitions. For example, in 2009, in the middle of the financial crisis, they bought Barclays Global Investors, becoming the leading provider of index funds. And then a few months ago, you announced the acquisition of Global Infrastructure Partners, one of the main international investors in energy and transport assets. And today we have the opportunity to hear from Mr. Fink about his strategy and his views on markets. Mr. Fink, when you look broadly at the investment world today, what do you think are the key factors impacting the investment environment? Many analysts are focused on monetary policy, but then you have geopolitics, technology, climate change, demographics. What do you think are the main factors for investors now?
Well, many of those macro themes that you talked about are obviously going to have an influence on the markets. You mentioned demographics, which in the developed world is now having serious declines. The geopolitical issues of a war in Ukraine, the uncertainty of Israel and Gaza and Iran, and how does that play out? So these are very big macro themes. In addition, we have the whole decarbonization and climate change issues. These are big issues, and they're going to be with us for tens of years. These things are not going away. Now, hopefully, within a short period of time, the geopolitical issues can go away, and we can have more peace within the world. But the climate issues, the issues around demographics are macro issues that we're going to have to work around those issues and having a thematics around those issues. And then if you overlay AI and advancements in technology, to me, these are going to be the big macro themes. It is my view that technology is going to advance the world faster than we've seen in the past. And the countries, the regions of the world that invest in technology and AI are going to be the regions and countries that are going to be moving in an accelerated fashion. I think the technology transformation that AI can present is going to change how we work, how we receive information, the quality of the information we receive. Obviously, we're seeing technology change in military warfare. We watch that live on television, how that plays out. But even in things like energy extraction, so I'm talking about traditional hydrocarbons, it has been technology that has created the U.S. Growth in energy. We have not discovered any new wells or reserves. It's just better technology extraction in the existing wells and reserves. So from our perspective, technology and how regions and countries use technology is going to be the dominant conversation that is going to supersede demographics. Hopefully through better information, better technology, we could bring down the cost of decarbonization. What we witnessed because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine and this run-up of gas prices So we can have ambitions to decarbonize, but the reality is, and the political reality in every country is, if the cost of energy and heating and power goes up, politicians really have a hard time surviving. And so we even saw in Europe when you had the rise of heating, the Europeans subsidized heating to as much as 800 billion euros. And so, as I wrote in my chairman's letter, even the conversation about energy and decarbonization, it is going to have to be done in combination of the utilization of hydrocarbons so we can make sure the transition is not inflationary and it's not unjust. So the problem we have today is we are not focusing on the totality of these big giant regime changes. For instance, the regime change of moving away from hydrocarbons is probably the most dramatic change in all our lifetimes. And it's not going to become, it's not easy. And at this moment, it is not cheap. It is very inflationary. And so I hope through technology and through proper investing, we find new technologies, new solutions, so we can bring down the cost of decarbonization so it's competitive with traditional power. And so I'm a very large believer that technology, especially AI, is going to reshape the world, and it's going to reshape the winners and losers in the world.
So the market is right now to focus on AI as one of the main drivers of returns in the next few months and years.
Well, a number of years ago, the S&P 500 index, if you calculated the top 10 stocks in the S&P index, even only a few years ago, it represented around 20% of the full 500 stock index. Today, these top stocks, which are all technology stocks, represent 38% of an index. It just gives you a great understanding of what the market is saying about this technology and these companies who are advancing these technologies. One of my big underlying worries, since we are here and talking about Europe, Europe does not have many answers or many companies that are in the front line of this technology revolution. AI is going to be reshaping everything we do. And the advancement of AI at this moment looks like almost entirely US-based companies. So I can sit here today and say, I am very bullish on the United States. And I'm very worried about Europe if they don't advance technology. And the need for technological advancement is really important today. And this is part of my conversations I'm having with every head of state in the world.
Yeah, in your last letter to investors, you mentioned the importance of capital markets to fund all these investments and then generate wealth. But in Europe, we are still much dependent on traditional funding from banks.
Thanks, yes.
How Europe can develop and increase the dependence on capital markets?
The positive side of that is most governments understand the need of elevating the capital markets. A strong economy needs a strong banking system, a vibrant banking system, at the same time of vibrant capital markets. So when we add capital charges to the banks because we believe they may be too levered, there needs to be a valve or another area where society could finance, and that's the capital markets. And there is a big reason why the US, post-Great Financial Recession, was able to stabilize 5 to 7 years faster than Europe because of the advancements of the capital markets in the US. In Europe, we are starting to see a very rapid increase in the capital markets, which is great. But another good example of the power of the capital markets over the last 40 years in the United States is the capital markets securitizing U.S. home mortgages. In 1978, a home mortgage in the United States, and I'm talking about in the United States, a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, was typically 5% higher than the 10-year Treasury. So the U.S. 10-year Treasury today is like 4 3/4. That means the mortgage rate would be 9 3/4. Well, today the mortgage rate's at 7.5. So that homeowner in the United States was able to save 200 basis points, 2%, that they were able to finance their 30-year mortgage. And that saved hundreds of billions of dollars of interest costs to the homeowners. In Europe, most of the mortgage market is a 5-year fix and resets every 5 years. And so in Europe right now, as interest rates go higher, it has a much quicker impact on the economy. Whereas in the U.S., the homeowner who has a mortgage right now has not been impacted by elevated interest rates because they're sitting there with a 30-year fixed mortgage. And they got that 30-year fixed mortgage from the capital markets. And I'm using the mortgage as a good example of the power of capital markets, how it could transform and help society, how it could bring down the cost of financing, which is a much better mechanism for home ownership. It provides more economic vitality. And so to me, the capital markets is essential. And the advancements of capital markets is going to be essential for Europe, especially in the future.
Yeah. And do you have any advice for European regulators about how to develop these capital markets?
Obviously, we need to have the proper protections, and as the largest asset manager in the world, we do well when there's strong protections and there's not a weak party who's going to hurt the whole market. So we are a big believer that we have to have the adequate protections and structure in place. But that being said, if Europe is going to be competitive, it can't be more regulated than the United States. And I would also argue you don't want it to be less regulated. But historically, European regulators have treated markets with more regulation. The banking regulators historically have elevated the banking regulation in a more restrictive way than U.S. regulators. And so the big message I would give to everybody who's listening, to every regulator, with Europe's growing fiscal deficits, the only way we could fix these problems over the next 30 years, the burden of deficits, we need to find growth. We have to grow out of the problems. We're not going to be able to shrink out of that. So let me just also get back to AI and demographics. There are many countries in Europe that obviously today, the replacement of people is not happening. We have more deaths than births. So we see the trend line of declining demographics. So the only way we're going to be able to grow, generally when you have declining demographics, that's a very large headwind for growth. So the only way we're going to be able to grow is increasing productivity. And from my perspective, how we are going to grow productivity is full acceptance of AI, robotics, sensor technology. And we can elevate salaries with fewer people by having more technology, more robotics, manufacturing more and more, doing more things. And so I've had these conversations with many political leaders, especially those in Asia that have declining populations. And I said, historically we said having declining populations is a very bad outcome for growth. I could argue today a full adaptation towards AI and technology and utilizing that, we could create greater productivity with fewer people. And to me, that is going to be the mechanism to advance economies, especially advancing economies that have ever rising deficits.
Mhm. And with all this trend that you have mentioned and explained, what is the strategy of BlackRock to keep growing in this environment? Could you give us a couple of
So I would say the most important strategy we had when we started in 1988 was the belief that capital markets are going to become larger. I would say clearly, if the capital markets shrink, BlackRock would shrink. If capital markets continue to grow globally, we will grow with the capital market. So that foundational belief has not altered in our first 36 years. That capital markets are going to be the engine for more democratic growth. In addition, we believe, and I wrote this in my letter, that the role of infrastructure is going to play a major role in growth. If you now get back to AI is very expensive. To utilize AI, it requires huge volumes of power. And so if we're going to adapt AI, we're going to have huge pools of investments in power. We're going to have to spend much more money on power, on the grid, and that power is going to be heavily in renewables, but we are also going to still need a lot of dispatchable energy like gas. And so our strategy in the next 10 years is going to be based on expanding global markets in places like India and other parts of growing economies. By working on retirement, we announced just this week something called Life Path Paycheck, where we're recreating how one can have retirement with dignity by having more certainty of the retirement benefits. And so as the largest retirement manager in the world, we have a real obligation as a firm to try to focus on retirement, on focusing on how do we make retirement a more beautiful outcome, an outcome with dignity. So it's going to be retirement, it's going to be the expansion of capital markets, it is going to be infrastructure, and it's going to be AI. And I believe BlackRock is a leader in many of these areas. And so I believe we're very well positioned to be working with more economies like Spain on advancing these major themes. So we could have more financial literacy. We could have more positive financial outcomes. And importantly, we could lift more people to having a more favorable future.
Mm-hmm. So looking at BlackRock, maybe in 10, 15 years, you look at the company as a platform with all kind of different products, asset classes for all kind of people, investors. This year you launched a Bitcoin fund, you bought a global infrastructure partners. So you are growing in different areas. Is that the idea, to be a platform with all kind of products for any kind of investors?
Our job is to serve our clients. And so our acquisitions, our expansion in product is a result of hearing from our customers what they're looking for. And in some cases, anticipating our customers' needs. Our job is not about products. Our job is about financial returns. Our job is to make every one of our clients having a better financial future through positive, consistent investing. So we expand in these areas with the idea we believe these will provide good long-term investment returns for our clients. So our job is not about the proliferation of products. Our job is to help our clients have better financial future. And doing that the returns are elevated, they're consistent. And we do a very good job in making sure that we are living up to the expectations of our clients worldwide. As I say to everybody, our job is not to be a U.S. firm everywhere in the world. Our job in Spain is to be a Spanish firm and to be working with Spain, working with the economy of Spain, with the government of Spain. That's what we are in Japan. We're the largest non-Japanese retirement manager in Japan. That's what we are in Mexico. We are the largest non-Mexican retirement manager. And so our job is to be local, working with each local society and helping each society build a better future.
Mm-hmm. You've been 36 years in BlackRock. How have you adapted to the changes in the markets, in the governance issues? Have you changed your leadership style, or you have been keeping a similar style in your leadership?
My leadership change had to evolve as the firm evolved. When we were a small startup, everybody saw my moods. Everybody saw what I wanted to happen. As we expanded in geographical locations, the need to be more of a leader of inspiration is much more important. When we meet with our clients, when we meet with governments, my leadership style is very different today than it was 30 years ago, because our responsibilities are so much different than they were 30 years ago. I would say as a leader, my job is to stay in front of our needs. I have to grow every day, even after 36 years of doing this. And if I stop growing, I'm not doing my job on behalf of our shareholders of BlackRock, our employees at BlackRock, and our clients at BlackRock. So I would say the most important thing, what I've learned was, you can't stand still. You have to keep growing. You have to keep on learning. And the only way you could grow is to be a better listener, to listen to what your needs of your clients are, to listen to a government and what their needs are. And I think, over time, I personally have become a better listener. I would say 30 years ago, I was probably a better talker. So yes, my style has evolved because the circumstances have changed and evolved, and the role and responsibility of BlackRock in various countries has risen, and we have a bigger responsibility than ever. And so I take that responsibility every day seriously. Every day counts. We have to be driving success every day. We have to inspire every day. And we have to build a team that is just as inspired as the leadership.
Okay, I think we don't have time for more. Thank you very much for your comments. I think
Thank you.
Very interesting everything. And hopefully we'll see you next year